On October 22nd, 2014, just before 10 a.m., the internet-driven media world added to its bulk by way of a story that began forming about a shooting in Ottawa, Canada's capital city. It seemed that someone had been shot at a war memorial, and that there had been another incident at the nearby literal center of Canadian governing, the Parliament buildings. The rapidly forming picture told of a masked, armed man who shot a soldier standing on duty and then made his way to the nearby government building, where he made it through the front door and disappeared inside. Once the media's focus steadied on the situation, there was little choice but for a chronology of events to appear and be catalogued by those who had the need or motivation. The military man who had been shot was discovered to be one Nathan Cirillo, who was part of a group called the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders of Canada. He was standing with his friend and fellow member of that group as ceremonial guards in front of a monument to the First World War. Witnesses reported hearing the sound of about 4 gunshots and seeing a man, now known as Michael Zehaf Bideau, run from the scene with a long gun held at his hip and a bandana covering his face. Cirillo was said to be shot twice. Mr. Cirillo ended up on his back and surrounded by people as he lay on the ground. Michael Bideau was then seen getting into a nearby car, which might have had someone else in it, and driving a short way toward the Parliament building. He exited the vehicle at a place where he could not drive any closer, walked a little ways, and went up to another parked vehicle with someone in it, forced the driver to flee, got in, and then drove the very short remaining distance to the Parliament building's entrance. He stopped and got out of the car and ran into the building. Upon entering the building, a guard named Samir Sun attempted to grab Bideau's rifle, to which Sun was shot in the leg. The unarmed guard yelled about the gun as the intruder then ran down the halls of the ornately designed and stone arch reinforced building and eventually drew fire from armed guards in pursuit and was shot dead by the head of security. A few members of the Canadian government told of their praise for the man who they said was the one to kill the intruder, and he became a celebrity. The final crystallized story was that of a headman. The headman in charge of security for the grounds had been sitting in his office when he heard the commotion and went to confront the intruder. He killed the man in a heroic movie-type slide and shoot. Almost politicians were meeting together in the nearby rooms. They barricaded themselves from the source of the banging sounds they heard. Law enforcement swarmed the area, set up perimeters, and made demands of people and businesses. Their representatives said the situation was fluid and ongoing, and there could have been more people or places involved. By this time, Mr. Cirillo had been taken away by ambulance. A video soon surfaced of the incident inside the Parliament building. The video was taken by a reporter as he peered hesitantly down a hall and showed security personnel walking in an apparent pursuit of the infiltrator. The source of commotion can't be seen clearly, but during the video there was a short, loud burst of gunfire coming from nearby. That reporter had already been reporting online about the incident as it unfolded and later provided an unclear, still image of the video of what or who was the dead intruder. Breath. I guess I don't read often, especially out loud. As can be expected, those of us who like to analyze events had some questions. The shooter's identity came out quickly. First clear image was that the world was told was that of the shooter was one of someone matching the descriptions given by witnesses, having long dark hair, wearing the same clothes, and even holding a gun in the same pose. It was a single picture and was reported to be from an extremist's Twitter account. The specifics of ownership of that account were not known. In the photo, Michel Bideau, pronounced, changing this now, but I'm thinking about information, pronounced apparently according to his mum, Michael Bideau, born Michael Hall, I believe, Michael Joseph Hall, seems to be looking at the camera. The uniformly bordered background is one matching the stone facade of the monument where Cirillo was killed. The story is also that the picture came about when it was taken by someone at the scene who had their camera confiscated by police, who then took their own picture of the camera itself and sent it out to other law enforcement. It made its way to a military-themed Twitter account, which posts extremely detailed military information of all sorts. That account apparently obtained the picture from an extremist account. And a few days after October 22nd, as the story of this Ottawa incident spread, some information was being provided by authorities attempting to answer some of the simple questions that came into public light about aspects of the case. For example, because the official story was that Michel Bideau had recently spent 10 days in a free shelter, and then he obtained a car and a gun, questions were asked about how he might have obtained them. Also due to the fact that the Prime Minister himself, at least indirectly, I should look it up now to quote specifically, but for this article I have a set time limit. I have to set one myself. Connected to an event. Yes, the Prime Minister connected an event on October 22nd in which a soldier was killed apparently in the name of extremist religion. I'm calling 911 actually, I believe. Apparently as he exited this scene while he's being chased by police. It's a very interesting case actually, you should look it up. It's what's his name? Martin Couture, I believe, on October 22nd. There's a funny picture. Actually, I guess it's in his slideshow. I'm not looking at the screen, but a little planted knife, as it were. Knife stuck in the ground. Quite suspicious. Anyways, yes, the soldier was apparently killed in the name of extremist religious views. The Canadian Mounted Police felt the need to specifically say the cases were not connected. The government was more than willing to associate itself with Michel Vidot in order to imply that it was on the right track in its assessment of his possible threat to the world, but obviously more silent in regards to the specifics of their relationship. In the one-sided image portrayed to the public, the police are almost always and understandably shown as the interrogator and controlling mechanism in any relationships with individuals, but in reality the government needs people for sources of information and to fulfill many government roles. Government and law enforcement are quick to not only provide the public with the offender's information, but to provide an in-depth analysis as to his motivations while simultaneously giving contradictory statements of ignorance as to his actions. It was said that he wanted to travel to the Middle East to fight alongside Muslim extremists. One of the top representatives of the Canadian Royal Mounted Police said, "I think the passport figured prominently in his motives," referring to an apparent denial in his attempt to obtain one to travel there, and "we have not come to ground completely on his motivations for this attack, but clearly it's linked to his radicalization. Clearly it's linked to his difficult circumstances. Until very recently I had been concentrating on topics which usually had to do with things outside of Canada. In my very short time delving into this incident, I've already discovered that the Canadian terrorism-related world is incredibly small and interconnected. The apparatus in charge of Canadian security matters is called the Canadian Security Intelligence Services. Unlike the CSIS, the American counterpart in the CIA seems to try to distance itself from its intelligence sources and methods. The slightly more open and naive atmosphere in Canada has allowed a more interactive form of security to evolve. Compared to the CIA, CSIS seems to be more willing to engage society and present their ideology in apparent hopes of persuading the public as to their trustworthiness, or ideally, but no longer this time it seems, as simply being an honest broker. I almost hate to mention it as an influence, but I feel I'd be missing something if I didn't. Since September 11th, 2001, Canada and elsewhere has had more pressure to adopt the American standards of security. I understand the possible organic nature and evolution of a system, but any seemingly undue or aggressive pressures on the system are of course to be suspected of hidden motivations. 2014, and so far in Canada, being a year punctuated with a few unprecedented gun-related citywide shutdowns. Travel had not only been restricted for the innocent people in those instances, but also in other cases involving the government deeming someone a vague threat to national security and denying them international travel. CSIS had contact with roughly 100 people with whom it considered a threat by way of their possibly extremist views, and Michael Zihaf Bidot was one of them. Although interestingly, it was mentioned that he was not specifically on a no-fly list, which other suspected terrorists were on. Although I have read that Michel Vidot had applied for a visa, he was still in the process of waiting for one while the incident happened. It was reported that he'd received an answer and had been denied permission to travel, and that was the catalyst for his actions, as previously stated in the quote by police. It was widely reported that 2 days prior to Bidot killing Cirillo, the government raised its terror threat level from bottom tier to a higher level in response to an apparently religious-motivated hit-and-run murder of a soldier. In fact, that warning had been given the Friday before the incident on October 17th and echoed the embarrassing piece of propaganda, the 2014 public report on the terrorist threat to Canada, which helped further along the secret government's agenda of demonizing Bashar al-Assad and others, while simultaneously painting a picture of the restricted measures to society it wanted to see implemented. At some point, the numbers stop coming in and the analysis based on context must begin. And please allow me to be blunt, so this healthy bit of guesswork can be at all effective. The blanks don't get filled in except by those who don't draw it with government crayons. I'm the first to accept my limitations, but for what it's worth, do not doubt myself, so I'll tell you what I really think happened. The Parliament buildings and nearby environment clearly present a symbolic target as well as a clean-lined and fairly controlled environment ideal for a physical exercise. Nathan Cirillo was not. It's funny. I read Nason. It's my mind jumping ahead of the words as usual. Yes, he was not struck by bullets. He was chosen for his loyalty and looks to act as sacrificial lamb in the ideological war on terror. Although the story is that he was shot twice in the back from a hunting rifle, there is no blood seen. The first 5 people to surround Nathan as he lay on the ground acted very calm and calculating. 2 of the 5 were mentioned in the media as being a lawyer, a nurse, but both had worked with government directly. 2 others were uniformed soldiers, and the 5th was said to be a passing citizen who got the job of holding Cirillo's legs in the air, while the others practiced their CPR techniques. During this time, it seems curious, onlookers were kept at a certain distance. Another government worker walked up to the scene in the form of the head of all of Ottawa's medical team, who said he got the call for help while nearby at a government meeting about Ebola. During an interview with said chief medical man, Anthony DeMonte, Anthony explains how he saw the entry and exit wounds on Nathan Cirillo, and how he was quite sure the downed corporal's prognosis was bad. He talks about the situation in context of integration of services. By this time, government operative Michel Bideau was somewhere in the Parliament buildings. He spent the last few years sitting around playing the role of religiously yearning drifter, spending money as he pleased as long as it was off the record. He forced the authorities to arrest him for robbery in order to further develop his backstory. He also made sure that others had understood his apparent dissatisfaction with moderate Islam and Canadian foreign policy. I'm sure it will be often used as an example of evidence, such as I'm doing now, but during an interview with Margaret Lara, one of those who surrounded Nathan Cirillo, she suspiciously used adjectives and descriptions which indicate a contrived situation, such as drill and team. I'd say that the lack of excitement at the scene, even among those who weren't involved in the event, was representative of the instinctive analysis of those who hadn't read any of the signs of violence which would have been there had there been a more serious situation. There are more things I want to say about my theories as to contrived events, which I feel that this is a part of, but in order to actually finish this writing, I will leave some of them aside for now. But I will mention that I've theorized as to the specifics of what I see as an attempt to normalize the threat of extremism, and to associate the average citizen with the possibility of terrorism. This is done by insidious methods such as using terms like lone wolf and attempting to further the mental divide between apparently civilized countries and others, in order to help develop a sense of unity in regards to policies which help bind a country's morals together, provide a sense of social stability. The Parliament buildings and nearby environment clearly provide a symbolic target, but as well a clean-lined and fairly controlled environment. Ideal for physical exercise. Did I read that already? No, bear with me. I was reading up to see if I had doubled that. I moved paragraphs around a little bit, making sure I didn't stick another one in there, reading something twice. And bear with me as I ramble on, trying to find my spot again. Yes, certainly the environment, ideal, symbolism, all that crap, right? But yes, this was government-sanctioned propaganda in order to facilitate change and unify thoughts. There have already been decisions based on specifically what was assumed to have happened on October 23rd, and that will do everything from spending countless dollars on many forms of law enforcing measures to helping dissolve international borders to drastically changing the legal definition and implementation of what it means to be a free man. False flag, I'll tell you that much. Let's see, I'll just freestyle it looking at these pictures, maybe recalling information that I've learned about it. Evidence checkers. Evidence of their actions, of course. Look at the police standing guard over a scene with what? I don't know. I mean, I know they're protective of scenes usually, but it seems a little bit hardcore, a little bit too much. This was, I believe, a fort which was not locked the previous day and relatively open to public. And that day, or the day after, it was all of a sudden, I believe I remember reading armed guards bordering or at the gate taking credentials. A lot of the activity around. I thought this picture was kind of funny. I don't know, he's letting somebody through. I think somebody's deemed worthy to pass the line.
a lot of pictures from that day. I'd like to start seeing a lot more of them. Maybe some more good high-def pictures of Cirillo. I haven't looked too much into this incident. I've been as obsessed with it since the start, but I guess relative to looking into other things, I haven't spent a lot of time on the visual evidence and whatnot. It hasn't been around that long. I'm going to jump back to other things, the Boston Marathon incident for one, but this has certainly caught my attention and required, as far as I'm concerned, a project. And my attention was immediately towards this. It happened in my country, and it's all the stuff I've been researching. It's another false flag, guaranteed. It's a Boston Marathon, but a smaller one. This is way too obvious. I'm just looking for blood. I haven't found blood at all on any of his pictures, but whatever. An alternate theory is, and far less likely, but I think he was possibly shot, but with some kind of non-traditional projectile. Not very likely, but it's certainly possible. A lot of articles. There's a lot of contradictory information. Some of it being the simple stuff, the facts that haven't come out yet, poor reporting. But a lot of it was contrived, was basically what I think is they perceive how the media is being, reading the story and how it sort of plays out, and then respond accordingly to sort of the holes in their story, as it were, or the things that need to be explained a little bit better, possibly. Everybody trapped inside. Movement restricted completely. Here's the emotional. 2 dogs here. Story. Dogs waiting for the owner who's never going to come home. How dramatic. Exceptionally sad for me. Here's the liar incarnate here. He's a guy who's probably told by a higher government agency that he should be involved in this, and this is going to be an issue of national security, and that this is for the good of the nation. We need you to go along with this exercise there. And it's funny because they pick the highest ranking people for many reasons, I'm sure, but namely because they're the most trustworthy. They've got the most to lose and all that, and they've already been proven responsible, essentially. Dun, dun, dun. The Unabomber. Click, 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 I'll go really quickly. I don't even know. I wasn't going to show all these, or I was going to pick out select ones and have them timed out at intervals when I was reading the appropriate passages and whatnot. But time is an issue, unfortunately, and I would not ever even have this done if I didn't force myself into some kind of constraint. Oh, that was a Boston thing. There we go, look at that guy, radicalized. There's the guy who killed. It's very, very super sketchy story. Apparently hit somebody in a hit and run. He got radicalized and was evil. Anyways, I look forward to talking to everybody later. I thank you for bearing through my unbearable mumbling. Ciao.